Oh yeah. Hello, I'm Robin Vincent and welcome to Molten Modular. Today we're looking at the Synths Matrix Mixer. It's here under all these patch cables. The Matrix Mixer gives you 16 inputs and 16 outputs, and between it is this mesh, this matrix of routing possibility, where you can route any input to any output to all the outputs, any input to some of the outputs, and all the outputs from one input or more than one input. You can cross and merge and combine and sum. You can blend and mix and produce all sorts of outcomes that you never would have thought of previously. You could see it as an overly elaborate mult combined with an overly simplistic mixer. Anything you can do with a mult, you can do here. You can put one thing in, span it out to up to 16 other things. In terms of mixing, the simplicity is that it just combines stuff and can send it out of a single output, or a multiple output, or a choice or a range of outputs. You may be familiar with the idea from other synthesizers. For instance, the Putney synthesizer has a matrix on it, a pin matrix, and you use these pins, these kind of the end of patch cables, to make the connections, a physical connection between an input and an output. But on synthesizers, any kind of modulation matrix is hardwired to the various parameters within that synth. With the Matrix Mixer, it's not wired to anything unless you choose it to be so. And so you have scope to use it for audio, use it for control voltage, use it for modulations, use it for routing to filters, use it for looping through effects, using it to feed back in on itself, to bring a whole load of oscillators down to a single output, or a single oscillator auditioning through a dozen different filters. The fact that it's 16 in out also lets you sort of compartmentalize. So you can have 4 oscillators going in here, 4 LFOs going in there. You've got send and return on some effects going into a load of other channels. So you can develop quite complex patches that encapsulate an entire performance, an entire set. It can infect its way through all sorts of different parts of your rack, and you've still probably got room for something else. Now, there's nothing in here particularly that you can't do in other modules. You can have little mixer modules and mix stuff together. You can use mults to spread your signals around the place. But the convenience of the Matrix Mixer is that it is all there. You can remain connected to it and then just change things as you go. You're not constantly patching and unpatching things, unless you want to. You can go through a dozen different filters by having everything patched in here and not having to swap signals and chase about where things are going. This is taken directly out of the Synths Syntrx, their sort of flagship synthesizer. And it's a digital device that provides a digital connection between inputs and outputs, which are memorable. There are presets and patterns you can set up. You can then switch between them, which kind of elevates the Matrix Mixer into some other device. It's not just a modulation mixer. It's not just an audio mixer. It can now switch between different patterns. It can switch between things being on and off. You can turn off effects, you can turn off filters, you can switch mid-performance, hit a button, and now all of your oscillators are routing to something else. It can transpose, it can combine sequences. You can combine triggers and gates and whatever you like to produce different outcomes and different potential things that may or may not happen. So as by way of example, here's this first patch. I've been working on it. I've had it a couple of days and I've been trying to work out what works, what doesn't work, what feels good, what doesn't, and this is kind of where I've got to now. Now in a minute I'm going to have to pull all this apart to start talking about it at a very basic level and maybe try some other ideas. But within this singular patch I've got 3 different sound sources. I've got half a dozen different effects. I've got a couple of filters, 3 different sequencers and some LFOs all going on. and all being changed and varied during the course of a performance. Because the thing that really made the light bulb come on for me was the ability to change how everything roots, because variation in Eurorack is hard. It's hard to find a way of doing different things. How do I make it different? I've got these couple of things going on, and then how can I vary it? And the ability to switch patterns within the Matrix mixer absolutely enables that. More than enables it, it encourages it, it pushes you, because you're not just routing an oscillator through a filter to an effect, you're now putting an oscillator into here. And then you can make different decisions on where that's going to go. Is it going to go over there or over there? I've dragged effect modules out of dusty old drawers and put them up going, oh, I could use that. I could incorporate that in. Then I could switch between the two. I actually got working on the beads and got something out of it, which is extraordinary by itself, because it encourages that kind of experimentation. It pushes you into thinking, how is my routing going? How could I, oh look, I've got a couple of spare channels, let's stick a couple of LFOs in there, and then I could whack that to that oscillator and then whack it to that one when I move to the next pattern mid-performance. It's brilliant. It's totally brilliant. So I've done this, I've recorded a take of this performance that you can go and check out, you know, if you like, but I'll just give you a very quick demo to show how the Matrix mixer and the patterns within it are enabling the changes and variations. There's only 4 channels of sound. I've got a bass line. I've got a lead line or an arpeggiator. I've got some percussion. And I've got the surface, the qubit surface, making string type noises. And there's a lot of stuff going on, far more stuff than I would ever normally put into a patch, because, you know, I run out of ideas when doing things in series, but because I can route to so many different things, you suddenly do so. And what happens is when I change a pattern, the sound changes. Now it's not massively, it's kind of subtle, because all I'm doing is changing what effects are being used. So you didn't really notice, did you? Did you hear the way that the delay dropped off the bass line at that point? And now I'm feeding something different into the data bender. Then I've added delay back into this. And then if I want to introduce a variation, I do another change where I'm calming things down and routing the surface through the beats. and I've dropped out the percussion. And this is all done within here. I've just turned those channels off. I then brought in an LFO. I only had a couple of channels left, so I thought, well, where can I route that to? So in another pattern, I don't know, any old where. So I've routed it. Just dropped an LFO into this and also the filter. I can pull that out again. Bring the percussion back in and move things back to the data bender. Drop the delay out. Then with a little bit more room, I fed the sequencers in from, I've got a sequence coming out of here, coming out of the M185, and the little 8-step sequencer up here. And I added the keyboard into another input, and I've added the voltage that comes out of this to each of those sequencers. And that means I can transpose. At a touch of a button, a key. Well, you can tell I'm enjoying myself, which I am. I've never done a patch like it. I've never incorporated so many different elements into just a couple of simple loops of sound. It's amazing. It's intoxicating the way that this makes you think about routing and using your rack. You know, I feel like a whole other section of my brain has been opened up to explore different things. Now, as I said, of course, I could have been doing this without the need of this thing. I could have got more creative with little mixers and with mults, and I absolutely could have patched a very similar thing just using modules. Could I then change it? No, I couldn't. I'd have to repatch everything, or I'd have to get a load of little switches and then switch between. You know, anything is possible in Eurorack, but the Matrix mixer just makes it so easy to experiment, to change, to move, to vary, and to find and discover other things. Now, it does take a bit of thought. You know, it's taken me a couple of days to build this patch, when normally I'd throw something together in half an hour. This has taken time and thinking about it, and then building particular bits of my rack, putting those together, thinking, well, how can I use that? Oh yeah, and then experimenting, going, no, that's no good, and then trying something else, and then weaving that in. But it's all good stuff. It's all stuff that you're working through. You know, it's not like it's a chore. How am I trying to do this and use this best? This is like, oh my goodness, I could do this. I can find this pathway. I can get excited about things I didn't know I was going to get excited about. And so the Matrix Mixer is one of those devices that just opens up the possibilities within your Eurorack. There's also a lot going on. I mean, there's plenty of room for getting lost. I mean, entirely. I mean, one of the things I really liked about the Future Sound Systems, their MTX 8, I think it's called, their little analog Matrix mixer, is that you could write all over it. It was white and dry white, and you could write all over it in a marker pen. So you could label all the inputs and all the outputs and draw arrows on it and stuff like that in order to give you a bit more of a clue as to what's going on. With the gorgeously deep black of Erica Synths, I mean, I could get some Tipex out, but I don't think that would really work very well. So, you know, a lack of labeling, you can get lost into what things are going. You're sort of going, what is this connected to again? But potentially, you know, I can stick a bit of masking tape up the side and write on that. Or perhaps it's always going to be evolving and changing. And so maybe things like that would purely be temporary. The other thing that I feel about it is that it does focus you into here. So once everything is patched in, you're then on this matrix of trying to make connections. And something is slightly lost in that, because I enjoy the exploratory nature of taking a patch cable and going, oh, what happens if when I plug this in here? Now, this is doing exactly the same thing, but without all that fingering and handling and physical placement and movement. But actually, the physical placement and movement, the manual labour involved in Eurorack is one of the things that I love about it. The fact that I intentionally have to do something. I make a decision and I fulfill that through physical movement and action and connection. Whereas here, I'm kind of just fiddling about. And bing, and I'm there. Or bing, another one. Bing. You know, I'm playing kind of battleships on this thing. Rather than being involved in the signal flow. Does that make kind of sense? But as I've said, the flip side is that this has introduced a level of creativity that I hadn't previously had in my fiddling and fudging around with patch cables and plugging it into things. So, you know, pros and cons. Yeah, while many things are found, some things are lost. And that tends to be always the way whenever you find something which is altering your workflow. But what I think I should do is take you through the basics, just so that we grasp what it is that's going on, and I can point out the various features, and then I'll try to patch something else entirely different together to see if that'll work. Which means I've got to take this apart, which is a shame. But such is the life of the reviewer, I'm afraid, is that you can patch up something that you really enjoy, and then, oh, I've got to test this thing out. You have to just take it all apart again. But I'm okay with that. I've made my peace with that, and that's what I'm going to do now. Here's a quick patch comparing a couple of filters. It's funny, I was just putting this together in order to try to show the basics, and then it just took me off down this road, where I now have something kind of small yet wonderful happening that I just thought I would continue to develop a little bit. So very simply, we have two patterns. One going through the Jove filter, just got the Honor oscillator here going in somewhere, and then it's being routed out to both the Jove filter and the Grit filter over here. At the moment it's just going to the Jove, and that's what we're hearing. Very simple, but with a touch of a pattern I can then shift it to the other one and also introduce a delay. And back again. It's this ability to morph and change things which is so enticing with this thing. I know I'm supposed to be very focused on the routing and that kind of thing, and that's definitely a massive part of it, but it's this switching that I'm really enjoying, this ability to be one thing and then another, just at a little shift of a pattern. That is really hooking me into this at the moment. Now, while I'm sure you get the whole idea, inputs, outputs, let's just try to go through some of the basics without me getting sidetracked and distracted down some kind of rabbit hole. So it is a nice chunky desktop box. On the back we have two outputs and two inputs, which mirror the first two inputs and the first two outputs on the top. You've also got MIDI in and out, and an on-off switch, which is backwards. You have a grid of 16 by 16 that you navigate with these very clicky, delightfully clicky encoders. And in order to connect an input to an output, you just find the intersecting circle, light, LED, and press, and it is connected. Let's start with nothing and just demonstrate that a tiny little bit. So you can save a pattern on every single one of these little lights. So when you go to recall, here's some that I've made earlier. I'm going to go to an empty one and just load that. And so I have an empty patch. So I'm going to take an output of an oscillator, plug that into input 1. I'm going to take my output, plug that into output A. The simplest of connections. In order to make that happen, I just navigate myself over to navigate over to 1A and press down, and you are connected. I can move away and you can see the light is lit. Now, it's a little bit cleverer than that because it has some attenuation built in. You can have it at 100% like that. You can also have it at 70% like that, slightly dimmer, or 30%. If I put a 100% there, 70%, and a 30%. You can see that they are just slightly dimmer from each other. And this is a really useful feature because as you start to add things and mix them together, there's no balancing or averaging going on. Everything just gets added on top layer by layer. So if you're not careful, you can overload very quickly. So for instance, you want to bring in 3 oscillators to use as a 3 oscillator voice. You can plug those in, have all 3 at once, and the output is going to be massive. But if you use the built-in attenuation, you can reduce that and so keep everything a little bit more together. And a point about mixing generally is that it is a very, very simplistic mixer. It's just sticking stuff together. And you quickly find that it doesn't have all the facilities that you perhaps would need in a mixer. So in my other patch, my more complex patch, everything was first of all going through a mute module, a muton I've got over there by SSF, which enabled me to turn off channels in and out without having to do this. Because while this is fantastic, it's also a little bit slow compared to just hitting a mute button. And this isn't set up to have a row of mutes down here. It would be lovely if it did, but that's a different product, I think. This is keeping things simple and is expecting you to have peripheral modules and bits and pieces that you need to achieve the things that you want. Any other matrix mixer, an analog one, wouldn't have any stages of gaining within here, wouldn't have any attenuation levels, whereas this gives you 3, which is very, very handy at keeping everything under control. One other quick feature is that you can audition a connection rather than making it, which I'm not entirely sure if that saves you anything, but if I hold shift and press down, it momentarily auditions that bit. So you could go through going, that one, that one, that one, and then settle on the one that you want, I suppose, rather than clicking on and clicking off. It's something. Let's wiring a filter quick. So I'm going to take an output, say C, plug that into a filter over here, take the output of that filter back into the mixer. Now I don't have to put it back into here. I could have the output of my filter plugged into something else somewhere else and have that going through my regular system. But I'm finding it increasingly interesting to have everything coming back through here because it gives you the maximum amount of versatility. So I'm going to put this into, let's say, channel 5. Now in order to hear the filter, I've now got to make the connections here. So oscillator is coming straight in and out to A. Now I want it to go through the filter, so I'm going to turn on output C to take channel 1, which is my oscillator, out to the filter. I still can't hear it because I haven't activated the output coming back, which is here. So I want to hear channel 5 I'll have to go down to it and enable it. So now coming out of A, which is my output, I have the original signal plus the filtered signal. So already I'm getting this summing situation where I've got two signals together in parallel rather than in series, how you'd normally have an oscillator going through a filter. But if I wanted to do that effect, I would just turn off the direct connection between the oscillator and the output. So now I'm just going through the filter. Maybe what I'll do now is take an LFO out of the Batumi, so a sine wave LFO, plug that into an input, say 9. I've got all this space, you see, I don't need to crowd it into a corner, although crowding into a corner is probably a good idea in terms of organisation and in dealing with where the heck everything is going. So I've got a sine wave going into there. Now I can choose what I want to do with that. So let's take another output, G, and I'm going to plug that into the FM input on my filter. But I'm also going to take another output, I, and plug that into the FM input on the oscillator. So I now have two possible destinations for my LFO. So the LFO is on row 9 coming in, so I'm going to want to put it to G and I, or not, or either or. So that's it going to G. And for the oscillator. So just by making connections, you can change what it is that you're doing and utilize a single thing for multiple destinations. It's a mult, it's a mixer. Do you see how these sorts of things are working? So let's put in another LFO so we can combine a couple into a single patch. So I'll put that into 10. So I want to route 10 to the same as the other one in order to combine the two to control the filter. So I've now got the two LFOs working together going into the filter. I mean, there's nothing spectacular happening here, I'm just purely showing some basic mixing of waveforms, some basic routing. So let's bring that delay back in. I'm going to send output E to a delay, bring that back in on, let's say, input 13. What did I say it was? E. So E is the output. So I want the output of the filter, which is 5, to go to E, and then I want that to come back in so we can hear it here. Oh, that's 15, 13. This slightly offsettingness can, sometimes confuse you because it's not exactly lining up with the jack. Of course I can decide when I want the delay to be in the signal path. I might want it to be right at the beginning rather than with the filter. So the filter part is now no longer part of the delay line. It's just that part. If I was to put a tune in, that would make a little bit more sense. but at the moment I've got the filter and the delay running together in parallel. It does get complicated if you're not careful. So I've got 5 here going to the output. I've also got the delay going to the output. So it may be better to have the delay go to the filter, which is C. So I can have the original oscillator no longer going to the filter, it's going to the delay. Delay is coming in over here. I can then send the delay, are you still with me, to the filter. Turn off the direct signal. So I've now got it all grunging through the grit filter. Don't know if I want that. I might turn it back on over here. I'm going to add the filter in as well. I can of course feed the output of the delay back into itself. For a nice bit of rising feedback. And so just through our messing about, we've got a sequenced oscillator running through the filter, running through the delay being mixed back in with the output of the filter and the original audio, giving us an interesting wet-dry mix. And then we've got some LFOs in here messing about with the filter. Now there's nothing there that I couldn't do by any other means, but it's just an interesting place to play. It makes you think differently, it makes you approach things differently. It makes you sometimes do simple things in a really complicated way, which wasn't remotely necessary. And you tend to use up a lot of patch cables because you suddenly have new ways to go. And you're placing this sort of in between your patch. So this sits in the middle and in and out and in and out, and that allows you to then mesh all those together. But it does create quite a bit of patching. It's very, very interesting. Here's a patch to demonstrate another feature of the Matrix mixer, and that is its ability to randomize. Because it's a digital box, it can put those connections wherever it likes, just at the touch of a couple of buttons. Bam! Everything is routed to everything else randomly. You have a certain amount of control over the amount of randomization, or how far or dense it's likely to go, and you can also tailor it down to just a section of the LED panel. So if you've got a patch set up and you want to keep some of that unchanged, then you can just focus the randomization on a smaller portion of it, which is very interesting. How does that work in practice? Well, I've got every modulation output, every output of my stack of Moogs here. I've got a DFAM and two Mother 32s. Every output is stuffed into here, and all the outputs are stuffed into every modulatable input. Pretty much, I think. Pretty much got it covered. So all outs to all ins. And currently, as a basic patch, I've got this going on. You know, just something fun and fruity. So what I'm going to do is hit the magic two buttons, which is shift and right, and it will randomize. So we will get all sorts of stuff happening from all sorts of different places going into other destinations. Ready? Who knows? Let's fire the button again. One more time. Let's keep going until we find something. Oh yeah. Now the point here is that I'm having a little bit of fun with it, because the randomization within 16 ins and 16 outputs into all of the possible output and input destinations on these three is just kind of a bit ridiculous. Although, funnily enough, I do get some nice stuff out on the DFAM. Fascinating. Fascinating. So I think what's probably better in using this sort of functionality is to manage it a bit better. Calm it down. Bring it down into some kind of usability that's not just going to go completely haywire. But it all comes down to what you're patching. If you have an immense amount of modulation that you want to randomize into all sorts of destinations, then this is perfect. Absolutely perfect for that. But what I'm going to do, I think, I'm going to calm it down to just a few channels of modulation possibility, and then see what it's like as you cycle through various random possibilities of that. Right, this time, in order to contain the randomization a little bit, I'm using 8 LFOs. I'm using a few from the DivKid Oct and a bunch from the Batumi. So I've got some regular smooth LFOs, and I've got a couple of sample and holds and a couple of squares. And that's all going into the first 8 channels here. And then the output of 8 channels is going, you know, more or less to the filter, to modulation on the DFAM. I've got VCF-decay, VCO1CV and VCF mod, and then on the Mother 32s, cutoff and resonance, and yeah, I think that's about it. Just trying to keep it simple and effective in order to hopefully experience the results of that. Now on the Matrix mixer, in order to confine the randomization, you hold shift, hit the 2 pattern buttons, and this gives us a few. These first four rows are actually menu items. The first one I think is MIDI channel. The second one is the density of randomization, so it can go all the way up to 16. I'm currently down on 5. And then these two here dictate the size of the randomization plane, where the randomization happens. So it's pretty much over everything. So I'm going to bring this down to H and bring this down, whoops, to here. So about 8 in X and 8 in Y is the idea. So the randomization should only happen in this top quarter. That's the plan. That's the plan. Let's see how that looks. So at the moment I've just got the outputs patched in to a P, which is going to the output, and it sounds like this. So hopefully through the magic use of randomization it'll produce something interesting. Yes! Yeah, interesting. Try again. Try again. So I wasn't claiming that it was going to be brilliant or anything, but it all comes down to what you're patching into this thing. And please don't take my fumbling around with control voltages and modular to be any kind of indication of what is uniquely possible with the Matrix mixer. I'm just having a bit of a go in the time that I have allowed to get this video done in time for release. So, I mean, one of the things I'm learning definitely about the Matrix mixer is that it requires thought. To get the best out of it, you've really got to think. You've got to channel your energies into how you're routing, where things are going, and the choices that you are making. I mean, because it's asking for decisions all the time. It's asking you to decide how to route things. You're not really exploring so much as making a lot of decisions on where things could go, and then swapping between them, and then changing it, and then making more decisions. It's a decision machine, is what it is. And perhaps that's what you need in Eurorack. Maybe you're floundering around going, I'm not quite sure what to put what into what next, or how to change what it is that I'm doing. I'm doing the same thing over and over again, and this is exactly the sort of thing which is going to pull you out of that. Kicking and screaming maybe, but it's going to pull you out of that and push you into a situation where you're going to have to make more choices, better choices perhaps, different choices, unexpected choices, and it will take you down different roads. That's certainly how I'm finding it, and it's not always going to be completely successful. I mean, the randomization function is interesting and fun, and it's something that can really bring a sense of risk and danger to your patch because you're never entirely sure what's going to happen next. But properly contained and properly managed, it can be an immensely creative little way of trying out different things, a routing that you haven't thought of, putting this into that, you know, which is ultimately what the modular journey is about. It's about putting this into that. And this enables you to do that with a plum in all sorts of directions, just with a couple of button presses. That's very, very interesting. So there you go. That is the Synths Matrix mixer. At least that's my take on it so far. I hope to spend a lot more time with it, and perhaps in the future I'll be able to do more performances that use it as effectively as possible, because it's an awesome performance tool. It is absolutely the sort of thing into which you could store an entire set and then step through them and back. And all it's doing is doing a bunch of routing for you. It's not taking over from your performance. It's not changing any of the dials for you. It's purely a way of remembering different routings for you. So you're not flailing about trying to find a patch in the middle of a performance. You're just hitting a button and that patch has been made, and you can make a solid decision to move forward into something else and back again. I mean, you can make it as complex as you like, or at a very basic level, it's a great desktop solution for where the heck all of your audio is going to go. What little mixers do you have scattered around everywhere? What mults do you have scattered around that you're trying to use, trying to plug more cables into each other? And you've got piggybacking cables, and you've got, you know, star-shaped things you plug into. This can replace a lot of that with a very well thought out system of making those sorts of connections. On the other hand, it is taking patch cables out of your hands to some degree. You don't quite have that same exploratory finding a hole to put a patch cable in. It's because it's pulling together your thought processes. It's trying to find a workflow for you through the routing and connections, through the multing and the mixing. And that's not necessarily what you want in your system. You might just want to explore one thing into another thing. But I think at the stage where I am at the moment, where I'm exploring performance more and more, I'm trying to hone down what I'm doing, how that's working, and how to craft it into some kind of entertainment, some kind of entertaining piece of music, you know, in a stage situation. Then this, I think, can be really, really useful in working those things out. Oh, it's fascinating. It just gets my brain working every time I look at it. And I don't always want that. Sometimes I just want to kick back and I want to plug things into different places and enjoy whatever happens out of that. But there's other times when I wish that I could get more of a handle on things, that I could organise things and put things in order better. And this could be a great tool for that. So, you know, interesting, really interesting. The box itself is around £500 to £600, depending on taxes and shipping. And so is, I feel, quite reasonably priced for the sort of functionality and potential that it's bringing you. And its feature set really does set it apart, I think, from anything else that is out there. The fact that it's 16 by 16 gives you acres of room to do more than one thing at a time within that space. The attenuation you've got on the signal connections is extraordinarily useful to stop that build up and overload of things, and also to give you a little bit of nuance. You can even do some sort of fake stereo by shifting the attenuation on two channels of sound. That ability to switch between patterns in order to vary your performance is invaluable. And then the randomisation could be an awesome thing for you if you work at it hard enough, I would say. So there you go. Hope that was helpful. And in the meantime, go and make some tunes.